She laughed like my existence was a joke. My sister's just a gate guard. Who would want her? The room split open with laughter. I could feel the heat climb my neck, but I didn't move. I sat there, clutching the cheap dress I'd saved up for, trying to remind myself this was her day, not mine. Then my mom leaned in loud enough for the hall to hear. "She's the shame of this family." My chest went hollow. I had been on duty that morning, standing in the dust of the small town gate where I worked. Minimum pay, long hours but steady. And they turned that into a punchline. The laughter stung worse than any insult. The groom shifted in his chair. Tall, polished, his military uniform pressed sharp enough to cut. A U.S. Army major, marrying into a family that thought humiliation was entertainment. He looked at me, longer than he should have, and stood up. The air changed. Forks stilled. Conversations died. "Actually, she's..." His voice carried, firm and measured, the kind that silences a room. My mom froze mid-smile. My sister blinked, then swayed, and her bouquet slipped. The hall gasped. She fainted right there, hitting the floor with a dull thud. I didn't move. My throat was locked. Everyone's eyes dotted between him and me, waiting. My mom's face drained white, as if every cruel word she'd ever spoken had been stacked on her shoulders. He didn't finish his sentence. He just let the silence burn. My heart thudded like it wanted to escape. That single unfinished line was worse than a confession. It was a question mark left hanging over the entire wedding. The whispers began. Aunts muttering. Cousins smirking. Guests shifting, suddenly aware that maybe I wasn't invisible after all. My sister was carried out. The dress she worshipped crumpled in the hands of two bridesmaids. I could have smiled. I could have stood up, claimed something I hadn't earned. But I stayed seated, letting them twist in their own unease. My revenge wasn't in words. It was in their fear of what might be true. Have you ever watched the people who broke you suddenly wonder if you've been holding the real power all along? The wedding resumed, awkward and fractured. My sister's face was powdered, her veil straightened, but her hands trembled as she clutched the bouquet again. The major sat tall, calm, unbothered, as if nothing unusual had happened. Yet everyone could feel it. Something had shifted. I stayed quiet at my table near the back, chewing the inside of my cheek, watching them steal glances at me. Every laugh now felt forced. Every toast trailed off early. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. She kept fanning herself, pretending she was overheated, but I knew better. That silence he left hanging was crawling all over her skin. The photographer tried to bring back the cheer, snapping shots of the couple, the cake, the family. When it came time for the full family picture, my mom whispered, "Stay out of the frame." I stepped aside, but so did two cousins, on purpose. Their way of saying they weren't siding with her cruelty anymore. My mom's jaw clenched so hard her lipstick cracked at the corners. At dinner, I caught fragments of whispers. What did he mean? You think he's involved with her? Why did he look at her like that? Gossip spread like spilled wine. I didn't start it. I didn't have to. Later, while my sister danced with him, her smile wavered every time his eyes drifted toward me. He didn't say another word. But he didn't need to. The seed was planted. I watched her grip his arm tighter, desperate, insecure. Every step of that dance looked less like love and more like a battle she was losing. When the bouquet toss came, she refused to look in my direction. She turned her back and flung it so far left it nearly hit a waiter. Guests laughed nervously. She laughed too, but it sounded brittle, like glass about to break. I excused myself to the restroom. In the mirror, I saw a woman who'd been mocked, dismissed, treated like furniture in her own family. But for once, the room outside wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching, questioning. And my mom's silence was the loudest thing at that wedding. Do you know what it feels like when people finally stop laughing at you and start wondering if they owe you an apology? The reception dragged on, but the shine was gone. My sister tried to hold court, telling stories about their perfect match, but every word sounded like she was performing, not living it. The major sat beside her, nodding politely, though his eyes carried that same unreadable weight. When the cake was cut, he offered her the first bite. She giggled, but her hand shook so hard the fork rattled against the plate. The room caught it. Guests shifted in their seats, sensing the crack in her composure. I stayed still, sipping water, invisible yet central. My silence had become louder than her performance. Halfway through, one of my uncles leaned toward me. "You holding something back?" he asked quietly, almost conspiratorial. I shrugged. "I'm just here to celebrate." He studied me a moment, then chuckled under his breath. That chuckle traveled. Soon cousins, in-laws, neighbors, everyone was dissecting glances, gestures, moments. The wedding had turned into a courtroom, and the verdict wasn't about love. It was about me. I slipped outside for air. The night was cool, the parking lot lit by dull yellow lamps. I leaned against the brick wall, listening to muffled music. For the first time in years, I wasn't replaying insults in my head. I was replaying their faces when the major spoke. How quickly the power had shifted without me lifting a finger. The door creaked. My mom stepped out, her heels sharp against the pavement. She didn't look at me at first. She lit a cigarette, though she quit years ago. Finally she spoke. "Whatever you're doing, stop it." I met her eyes. "I haven't done anything." "That's the problem," she hissed. Her hands shook. "You sit there like you know something, and people believe it." For once, she looked small. I realized then. My silence wasn't just unsettling her. It was undoing everything she'd built on mockery and control. Inside, the DJ announced the first dance as husband and wife. But the crowd didn't surge forward. They lingered at tables, whispering, casting glances toward the empty space where I should have been standing forgotten. Have you ever realized the less you speak, the more the world leans in to listen? By the time the first dance ended, the room was restless. My sister smiled so hard it looked painful, clutching the major's hand like she was afraid he might vanish. He didn't pull away, but he didn't cling either. His calmness only deepened the unease. When the DJ tried to rally the crowd with upbeat songs, a few guests danced. Most didn't. Their attention kept drifting back to me. I sat alone at my table, eating slowly, letting the weight of their curiosity settle. Every time I lifted my glass, whispers sparked again. My cousin Hannah finally slid into the empty chair beside me. "What's going on?" she asked, eyes darting toward the bride. "Did he mean something about you?" I smirked faintly. "I didn't say a word." "That's what makes it worse," she whispered. Then, lowering her voice even further, "They're scared." I looked over at my mom. She was gripping her wine glass, her knuckles white. My sister kept stealing nervous glances, fumbling her laugh lines, almost begging for validation. And the major? He was composed, sipping champagne, occasionally scanning the room like a man used to commanding silence. When it came time for speeches, my dad stood up, voice shaky. He thanked everyone, praised the couple, but when his eyes landed on me, he faltered. Just a split second. Enough for the guests to notice. The air thickened. He cleared his throat and sat down too quickly. The microphone passed to my sister. She tried to regain control, boasting about their future, their house plans, the vacations they'd take. Yet the more she spoke, the less people believed. Confidence doesn't tremble. And then the major stood again. No toast in his hand. Just his presence. He placed the mic down without speaking, looked directly at me, and returned to his seat. That single act was more powerful than any words. The hall buzzed with confusion. My mom's face collapsed into panic. My sister's forced smile shattered into something desperate, like a mask slipping. I didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't explain. Have you ever felt revenge arrive not through action, but through the weight of everyone finally questioning the story they'd been told about you? The wedding night stretched longer than anyone wanted. Guests pretended to enjoy themselves, but the music couldn't drown the tension. The groom's silence had poisoned the air, and every glance toward me made my sister tighten her grip on him. When dessert was served, a slice of cheesecake was placed in front of me. A waiter, one of the younger kids from town, leaned down and whispered, "Everyone's talking about you. They think you've got some secret." He grinned, then hurried away. I stared at the plate, my fork untouched. I didn't need to spread rumors. They were spreading themselves. Later, my aunt cornered me near the punch bowl. "Tell me straight," she said, eyes sharp. "Is there something between you and him?" I blinked. "He's my sister's husband." She studied me, waiting for denial, but I gave none. Just silence. That silence was enough. She walked off shaking her head, and by the time she reached her table, whispers had ignited again. My sister tried to salvage the night with a thank you speech. She raised her glass, her voice quivering. "This is the happiest day of my life." She forced a laugh, but her eyes never left me. She was terrified I might stand up and say something. The irony was, she didn't realize the less I spoke, the more the room turned. The Major, steady as stone, nodded through her words but never smiled. He wasn't cruel, just unreadable. That unreadable look made her crumble. By midnight, the hall was nearly empty. Guests left in small groups, their goodbyes polite but distracted. None of them would remember the flowers, or the cake, or the music. They would remember the pause, the silence, the bride fainting, the groom's unfinished sentence. And me, sitting in the corner calm. As I walked out, I passed my mom by the door. She hissed under her breath. "What did you do to her?" I met her glare. "Nothing. Maybe you should ask what you did to me." Her face twisted, but she said nothing. She couldn't. Have you ever watched a celebration meant to erase you become the night that made them fear you instead? The next morning, the phone calls began. My cousin rang first, her voice tight with curiosity. What did he mean when he stood up? Was he talking about you? I told her the same thing I told everyone else. Nothing. But that nothing only fueled them more. By noon, I was trending in my own family group chat. Screenshots of blurry photos from the wedding circulated. My face in the corner, his eyes drifting toward me, my sister's faint collapse. Every comment was speculation. Every emoji was fire to the rumor. I stayed silent. I went about my shift at the gate, logging license plates, checking IDs, breathing in the dust. My silence became a story they wrote for me. That evening, my mom showed up at my small rented room above the diner. She barged in without knocking. "You've ruined her marriage before it even started." I folded my laundry calmly. "I haven't spoken a word." "That's the problem," she snapped. Her eyes darted. Restless. People believe silence more than lies. I looked at her. "Then maybe you shouldn't have laughed at me in front of everyone." Her face hardened, but she couldn't find words. She left with her fists clenched, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. Days passed, and the whispers grew. The Major was stationed nearby, so he was often seen around town. Every time someone spotted him without my sister, they wondered. When he greeted me politely in public, heads turned. My sister stopped showing up at family dinners altogether, afraid of facing the looks. At work, even the guard captain teased lightly, "Careful, you'll outrank us all if this keeps up." I just smiled faintly and handed him the daily log sheet. I never needed revenge spelled out. It was unfolding by itself. An echo of humiliation reversed. They had thrown laughter at me like stones, and now every stone was boomeranging back, striking them where it hurt. One evening as I locked up the gate, I caught myself smiling. Not from triumph, but from the stillness of knowing I didn't have to fight anymore. The fight was happening inside their heads. Have you ever seen revenge grow roots without you lifting a single hand? A week later, the family dinner was called at my aunt's house. My mom insisted I shouldn't come, but my aunt overruled her. "She's family. She has a place here." That sentence alone was enough to silence the room before the meal even began. I arrived late, wearing the same plain jacket I always wore after work. When I walked in, every conversation stalled. My sister sat stiff beside the Major, her fork clinking against the plate. Her makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion under her eyes. She looked smaller, like the wedding had drained rather than filled her. The Major greeted me first. "Evening." His tone was neutral, but the choice to acknowledge me publicly made the tension crack open again. Dinner was awkward. Every compliment about the food was cut short, every story trailed off. My mom kept trying to redirect attention, but no one listened. My uncle asked the Major about his station, his work. The Major answered calmly, then added, "Your gate guard here could probably run a tighter post than half my men." The table froze. My sister's fork dropped. My mom's hand trembled over her wine glass. And me? I just sipped water, keeping my eyes down. The whispers started again, low but impossible to ignore. Why did he say that? Why does he keep pointing her out? My silence was a mirror, forcing them to face what they had created. When dessert came, my sister snapped. "Why do you keep looking at her?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. The room went still. Her voice cracked, and in that crack, years of insecurity spilled out. The Major didn't flinch. "Because she deserves respect. Something you've all forgotten." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The weight of his words smothered the table. No one ate dessert. No one laughed. My mom's face collapsed into shame she couldn't mask. I left early, stepping into the cool night air, my breath steady. For once, I didn't feel invisible. I felt untouchable, not because of what he said, but because I hadn't lifted a single finger to make it happen. Do you know how powerful it feels when truth speaks for you, and all you have to do is stay silent? The fallout didn't take months. It took days. My sister stopped posting pictures of her new marriage. The carefully crafted captions about love and happiness vanished. Neighbors whispered that the Major wasn't seen at her side anymore. He still walked through town, still stopped at the diner for coffee, still nodded at me when our paths crossed, but never with her. I never encouraged it. I never sought it. I just lived my routine, early shifts at the gate, late nights folding laundry, weekends helping at the diner when tips were good. And yet, the less I did, the more their world unraveled. One afternoon, my mom appeared at my post. She looked worn, makeup smudged, her voice tight. "You've embarrassed us all." I logged another truck, handed back a driver's ID, and said nothing. She tried again. "Do you think this makes you strong? Ruining your sister." I looked at her calmly. "She ruined herself. You helped." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She left in silence, just as the gate clanged shut behind her. That night, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a wedding photo. My sister smiling, the Major's face unreadable. On the back, in her handwriting, "You'll never win." I set it aside, untouched, and went to bed. But winning wasn't the point. Revenge wasn't fire or noise. It was patience. It was letting them face the reflection they created. They mocked me for being a gate guard, for earning just enough to scrape by. And yet, here I was, steady, unshaken, while their marriage cracked under the weight of their own cruelty. Weeks later, word spread. My sister had moved back into my parents' house. She claimed it was temporary, that the Major's deployment required distance. But the truth bled through the town's gossip. He had chosen space, and she had chosen shame. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just kept showing up, clocking in, standing at the gate as the world passed through. My silence had done more than any outburst ever could. Revenge wasn't in what I said. It was in what I never had to say at all.